This is an interesting question. In physical life, clothes are used as markers of rank and status. Is this the same on the astral? Do people wear robes on higher levels? Can you see the color of the aura through the robes? Now, what I have experienced on the more Earth-like astral dimensions, we simply wear our normal everyday clothes. You know, there's no difference to what we wear here. We wear jeans or whatever we feel comfortable in. What we wear here, we carry on wearing over there. That is on the Earth, near Earth levels. And we may even carry on wearing these clothes. And I found on the medium astral level, people don't look that different. I found people that took pride in their appearance. One thing was very interesting, which I've written down in my book, Vistas of Infinity. A few days before I had this out-of-body experience, I went to a shop and bought a new pair of trousers. And they were quite fashionable trousers, but they were way out of designed for sort of teenagers. But being a bloke, I'm not sort of very aware of fashion and things. And when I came home and put them on, my wife laughed and said, "You're wearing teenagers' fashion." And the interesting thing was, I then had an out-of-body experience, and I was wearing the same trousers, which I had bought a few days before in the shop. And I met this family on the astral plane, and they commented on my trousers, which had some very sort of fashionable cross-stitching across the knee, which was quite unusual. And so the woman, when I started talking to her, she was making a matching jacket for me, which had similar cross-stitching and had similar sort of fabric, was made out of similar fabric. And this became the center point of our conversation. And I said, how difficult is this to make things here, you know? And I was admiring her skills of creating a matching jacket for my teenage trousers. And so that was really interesting. And then, of course, I noticed that these people wore clothes. They were conscious of what they were just as much as they're conscious here. Now, then as we move higher up, this consciousness of this fashion consciousness seems to be diminishing in favor of the energy which we radiate. And then it still feels very natural, because the clothes we then wear are an extension of our personality. They are fashioned by our aura. It's almost as if the colors of our aura, of our personality, weave a fabric which is in harmony with our inner being. And then you get really interesting and very beautifully dressed people on the higher dimensions, and the fashion is quite extraordinary. And on one thing also with regard to fashion is, when I met my mother and my aunt, when I had an out-of-body experience, they appeared to me dressed as teenagers who were just about going to a disco. And my mother died when she was 75. And she would never dream of wearing anything other than what a 75-year-old senior citizen would wear. But she went back into her youthful self, and in this elated state of being young again and unrestricted in her self-expression. And the way I came across them was they were like behaving like teenagers, and I didn't recognize my mother at first at all. And the fashion they wear was very much what young people wear. And the only way I recognized her was when she hugged me, and then I knew it was my mother. And she laughed, and they had fun winding me up by demonstrating to me that there's no such thing as a limited limitations in these kind of things. Now, on the much higher levels, where I came across fashion, one thing was an encounter with an extraterrestrial being, and I found the way they were dressed was incredible. Not only was their skin different and luminous, and the colors changing and flashing through them, they were very humanoid looking. And but their clothes were of a material which has no equivalent on our physical Earth, and they also had clothes which would change according to any ceremonies they were conducting. And also I found people had weddings on the astral level, and they were dressed appropriately. So yeah, fashion is a big thing of self-expression, the same way as we use fashion here. Now the next question is, do people continue to live in families? If so, are they families they had while alive? Do they seek out people they knew in past lives? That's a really interesting thing, because if we had a marriage on this earth, and some people here endure a marriage simply because they don't want to get a divorce, they don't want to, they don't want to separate because of the circumstances, because of habit. And there's very little really that ties them together once they go over to the next level. And very often you find that marriages sort of dissolve, or people enter into a state where they recognize the original spark they may have had at the beginning of the marriage, and suddenly it becomes very abundantly clear that they have failed each other. So they may start a new relationship with each other after becoming very conscious of, with a much wider perspective and much greater insight into the other person's soul, that they have missed an opportunity, and they see the afterlife as a start to a new marriage, renewing their vows, in a way which some people do here on earth after they went through a process of realization, and so yes. Now the other thing is, of course, if there's a love bond already in existence, this love bond, if anything, will be stronger. It will at least be maintained, but it can also evolve, because we have much greater opportunities now, which we didn't have. We were hampered by things like financial constraints, by worries, which all have disappeared, and now we have much greater opportunity to focus on the things which are real, which are the basis of our life. We are relieved of these burdens we had in the past. Now, the other thing is, of course, a love relationship between two people. Once we go over there, it can blossom into something which we never have been able to experience on this level, because we have got much greater powers available to us, a much greater expanded state of consciousness, where our sensitivity is much enhanced, and so we enter a much more pleasurable relationship with the people we have known, because our mind has expanded, so the appreciation becomes greater of each other, and we deepen our relationship, and that's really important to bear in mind. The other thing I noticed, I met people who were really, really, really old friends when I was out of body. And then I racked my brain. I thought, hang on, where do these people live in the physical level? I tried to remember who they were. They were very familiar to me, and I knew them intimately, yet they didn't exist on the physical level. So what we actually do, we connect to friends and relatives which have had no physical incarnation while we had our incarnation here on earth, and we recognize them, we get together with them, we reunite with them, and they're really old friends, and we know them really, really well. When I met my guide in the 70s, after I was trained by this guide, he was a Chinese sage who trained me on the astral level to enter into higher states of consciousness. The first time I met him, I felt he was a friend I had known two, perhaps 3,000 years ago. We were very good friends. But he also was my teacher. He became my teacher, and he then used my out-of-body experiences to train me to enter into a higher state of consciousness, which in 1980, he took me to these higher states, which I described in my book, Multidimensional Man. So, yes, the families we have here and the love relationships we had here, they don't go away. They're still there. And if we knew how potent this love relationship is, we can actually use it to connect to people while we're still here, and carry on our relationship, knowing that they are not on the physical relationship, and we can enhance our relationship even. It's just that we are too focused on our materialistic, on our limited life, that we don't actually take advantage of it. I always said love is the most powerful aspect to continue a relationship. For example, people who lost a child, who lost a husband or a wife or a parent, if they connect to love, there is a step closer we get to the person's essence. And on this aspect of love, we can continue our relationship, and we never need to go through the tragedy of bereavement if we connect to this sort of love aspect of ours. And of course, when our time comes, we just carry this feeling over to the next level, and we simply naturally reunite with a person. So that's really important, that people who have lost somebody, they should bear this in mind, so they don't suffer from the bereavement as much as we very often do, when we lose somebody. So